thanks for having me on. Well, you know who I am actually, Rob, maybe, because I've worked on the seamstressing department of Strictly Come Dancing, and I've met you before. But you probably don't remember me, and that's fine.
I have to say I don't. You're probably very, very talented. That's a nice surprise. Tell us who, Claire. Tell us who you are. Who is Extinction Rebellion?
So, Extinction Rebellion is a broad, open mass movement which participates in mass direct action, civil disobedience and non-violence in order to accelerate social change on the topic of climate breakdown and biodiversity loss. There's lots of different groups, so if you wanted to find out more, you'll find XR Muslims, XR families, there are scientists, doctors, nurses, lawyers. Actually, we've had a huge influx of people since the IPCC report, which just came out, obviously telling the world that we are in grave danger and that it is definitely man-made. Yeah, they're just a bunch of ordinary people, actually. So
the problem is, Claire, I mean, it's actually a good segue to say that you worked on Strictly. You will know that show is very much about image. Now, you won't have heard what I said before coming on today, but I did say that one of the great problems here is that there is an image problem. When I look at what Extinction Rebellion are doing, one of the things that really matters to me is the people who, you will agree with me, are most likely to be impacted by climate change are the poorest. Yet the activity of Extinction Rebellion is preventing the poorest, the least privileged, from getting to their places of work. That's just a starting point. Surely that's not going to win hearts and minds, is it?
Well, I think the disruption that's been caused this week is, relatively minor. It's in quite small spaces in London and it's moving around. There's nothing so far that's been overnight or particularly really disrupted people getting to work. I think, it's true that the poorest people will be hit the hardest by climate breakdown. And it's true that the poorest people in our societies don't often have the resource to undertake these kinds of campaigns. And it's the same for the suffragettes, for example. Historically, we see that the poorer people have to take different types of action because they have less resource and less time, and they can take less risk with their personal freedoms. So that is difficult, I agree.
One of the issues is, we're talking about those who are the least privileged, the people that have the least access to justice. That's millions of people. People who, frankly, have got lives of challenge, housing crisis, you name it. When you ask them, how far climate change sits up their list of personal priorities, it's not very high up. And yet it seems that the representatives of Extinction Rebellion want them to do the most. That's the first thing. And why aren't you protesting outside of the embassy of China, who are the biggest dumpers of, as you know, fossil fuels of any other nation?
Could you just be clear at what we're asking of the poorest people? I'm not sure what you mean.
No. This is the point. That it seems that the poorest are told that flying is a bad thing when they only have perhaps one holiday every 2 years, if they're lucky. That they have to spend their own money because often, as you rightly alluded to, in the poorer communities, the provision for recycling is the most challenging, etc. They're told to eat better foods in circumstances which are seasonal. Again, that's much more expensive. I am not a climate change nut. I want, like you, I think we share this mission, to bring everybody on board. But the spokespeople for climate change and the catastrophe that it's likely to cause are not just the least attractive, but are probably the biggest turbo hypocrites imaginable. And every one of them seems to represent the same sort of white privilege, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Where are the communities of poverty speaking on behalf of this issue, the issue that I care about just as you do?
Well, so it's important to know that there are a lot of people in our movement who are from different communities. So, we're greatly hindered actually in landing this message of huge importance with the public because of the way that the media are portraying us. And in some ways, I'd like to think about something, a very famous phrase, which is "don't shoot the messenger." Okay, so that phrase comes from a historic context where people who are maybe on two sides of a battle or a war have messengers, and if you shoot one person's messenger, they'll shoot yours too. So you destroy the social technology of being able to carry that message. Now, we've been told that we're in grave, grave danger, that 1.5 degrees of warming may be off the table. We know that that means we're liable to see multi-breadbasket failure. Lack of food will mean hikes in food prices. That will mean that in the near future, there's very severe impacts on the poorest people in all communities. And so preventative action and mitigating action is actually really, really important. And we're out here trying to land that message. And the media, rather than take the opportunity we give them, which is to help them to tell that story, because we give them a way to represent it. And we know climate and environment's not very sexy and journalists have struggled to cover it. We create an opportunity, and rather than take that opportunity and say, thank you very much, this is the most important issue of our time, the journalists are saying things like, oh, well, look at you, let's take you down on a matter of identity politics.
No. Claire, pause for a second. I'd sit down and listen to you. I don't know anything about your background. I do know you're probably, to say the very least, very talented to have worked in that Strictly room. That's the only thing that I know about your background. But there are two problems. The first one is that when you are a protest movement, you want to make radical change. You need to start, first of all, I used the word triaging before. You need to target those who are doing the most violence to your cause, right? You can't be everywhere. I understand you can spin two plates at once. But for example, a lot of people feel aggrieved that the Extinction Rebellion movement aren't directing their direct action ire at the biggest dumpers of fossil fuels in the world. That feels to them like a real problem, and surely you'd agree with me about that.
Well, there are historic responsibilities in this situation, which all of our international agreements have been written on. So actually the UK has a huge responsibility. You may not know that the City of London, if it were a nation, would be the 9th largest emitter on the planet. So we do have a massive responsibility in terms of the finance that goes through this country, which is why we've got this new immediate demand to halt new investments in fossil fuels. But also just because you're legally trained, right? So I'd be really interested to know, this report that's just come out, it's very significant because it says that this is definitely human caused. Okay, so if it's human caused and we recognise it as a crime against humanity to destroy the biosphere upon which we all depend, which I think it is, then whose fault is it now that we know that it's man-made? How do we pursue that in law? I don't know if you've got any. The question,
I think the critical thing as an advocate, I'm going to answer you in a legal way, Claire, is that I would want, like you, to bring as many people on to my side of the argument as possible, to place it up at the top of the things they should care about, because it's about their children and their children's children. That's the common ground that you and I can rest on. But I wonder this, I'm asking this you this directly. I understand that there's no coherent leadership, so to speak, of the Extinction Rebellion. It's a variety of groups that have been brought together, a smorgasbord, if you like. But don't you think that you don't shoot the messenger, but aren't so many of your messengers just incredibly unattractive? They're people of extreme privilege who don't follow any of the things, the people who are the spokespeople. You're laughing at me, but those are the people who place this at the top of their agenda. They fly around the world on private jets. They have climate change conferences in circumstances where none of us could ever reach those places. It isn't people like you. I never see people of colour, all the poorest people, standing up and saying this is the most fundamental thing you should care about. And surely you can't be happy as an activist with the type of people who are championing this cause on your behalf, because they're not winning hearts and minds.
Well, again, I mean, the reason why I left, Rob, was because you told me that our movement are extremely unattractive people.
No. Just to be clear, the people who champion climate. Let me be clear. Who would champion? Well, listen. We all have our own thing. I'm sure hemp and long hair definitely attracts somebody. It's not my cup of tea, but there you are.
I just told you, Rob, that there are huge numbers of nurses, doctors, lawyers, teachers, parents, people of colour, people of faith. You know, we opened this rebellion with speeches from our Internationalist Solidarity Network. They work to unite us, to connect us with people who have been in struggle and resistance in the Global South for a very long time. We've prioritised supporting reparations movements. You know, we do have a growing diversity, but it takes some time, of course. And that's based on trust and relationship building. So I'd say 2.5 years in now, we're doing much better, but there's so much more work to do, of course, to reach more working class people, to reach more communities of colour, to reach more disabled communities, more diverse communities who can come on board and support with this. But it's also really important for us to recognise, I think, that, you know, the urgency with which this needs to happen. And there is a historic context to doing this type of work.
Claire, you're clearly a very passionate spokesperson. Who do you think shouldn't be a spokesperson for this issue? Surely you, as an activist who've invested your life clearly into this, your passion into this, you talk about the urgency of it, and you know, anybody listening to you might be persuaded by it, but you must wince a bit when you see all of these Hollywood A-types, right, who don't do any of the things that matter, that you would want each and every one of us to do, to take individual responsibility for our lives. That must make you incredibly angry that people have, if you like, hijacked the climate change issue and cloaked themselves in it when they don't do any of the things that matter. That must make you frustrated, surely.
Well, it is frustrating. And, you know, we used to have a team that worked on notables, as we called it. So, you know, trying to bring famous people into the movement and help them get involved. And to be honest, most of them don't really do anything.
Good.
And they sort of come and go, yeah, I'm supportive, but they don't come and get into the, you know, they don't roll the sleeves up and come and cook the food or, you know, support people on the roadblocks that often. Right. So that's very challenging for us to like get support from people who can so easily you know, have the finger pointed at them. Myself, personally, you know, I don't have a car. I just ride this bike that I'm with now. I live in a shared house. I don't earn very much money. I don't eat meat. I don't go on flights anymore. I don't, you know, there's a lot of things that I don't do.
Right.
And, you know, but it's also clear to me that me doing those things isn't going to make really hardly any difference compared with getting serious political change on the table. So, you know, our thing at the moment is crisis talks, invite people to the table. And the reason we've done that is because we want to advocate for citizens' participation in democracy. If we had citizens' assemblies helping to decide how to respond to this crisis, obviously they're made up of like people in ratio with the nation as it is. So you make a microcosm of the nation. There would be the same number of men and women as there are in the country, for example, or the same number of people of a different faith or different colours, different economic backgrounds.
Though I have fundamental problems with that idea when you force people to participate. That usually doesn't work out well. You and I would disagree.
You don't force people. We had an assembly actually earlier.
Claire, can I just interrupt because I don't have enough time, and I want to get to this. You know, I've given you a serious platform for your message. A lot of people would sort of interrupt you and prevent you from giving that message. The important thing is, what is individuals' responsibility? And don't you want these kind of poshos to go away and not speak on your behalf?
No, I don't think that's my biggest issue, to be honest. I guess the worst people who are claiming to be environmentalists are people like Dan Wootton, Nigel Farage. You know, we go on their shows these days and they open with this audacious statement, I am an environmentalist. And you think, wow, that's interesting, isn't it? Because some time ago, I don't think they would have been saying that they were like us, but now they're saying they are like us because they've realised that we're in a very serious situation and everyone needs to care about this issue.
They're telling me I've got to get going. I want to give you one last thing to reflect on. You know, there was an article this morning saying that given what's going on in Afghanistan, it's yet more evidence that we shouldn't be worried about climate change, that this is really a first world issue. And this is a bunch of first worlders, first thing. And secondly, there is no limit to what Extinction Rebellion will do, including direct activism, which could destroy property. What are your thoughts on that before we go to break?
Well, so there are limits to what we can do because we've committed to non-violence. So that's first to be clear, that we're peaceful people and we always will be. I think, sorry, what was the other part of the question? That
given there's what's happening in Afghanistan, this is yet more evidence that this is an issue that's really a first world problem.
Yeah, so, well, the thing is, this is a global problem and it shows us our global interconnectedness as a family. We've taken actions in the past in in this country and in international negotiations to ensure that we don't do the right thing by people in the global south, in the vulnerable nations. And I don't know if you've seen the UNICEF report that just came out. 1 billion children are now at acute risk because of climate change. 1 billion children. Those are people who don't have a vote. They don't have any rights. They can't reallocate themselves. You know, they have serious risk. 1 billion children all over the world. That's only going to go up from here. So, no, it's not a first world problem. It's a global problem. We're just trying very, very hard to get the UK to take it seriously.